Usually people get to me with their success stories, and you're one of the first ones who comes to me with some regrets.
Yes, first game was very successful commercially, and our second game, while it is doing all right, has 90% positive reviews, it is far behind our first game commercially.
This is a conversation with Julian Colbus, the CEO of Digitales Interactive. They make narratively driven detective games like Lacuna or Between Horizons.
I would have more tried to find the essence, like what is the core and what makes that core fun, rather than thinking, okay, we have a working thing. How could we expand on that? Just focus on the thing that makes it good, and people will appreciate that, and you won't have to spend money on all the other stuff.
We talk about how to make successful indie games, in particular narratively driven ones, which I find a super fascinating topic. Does story even sell games nowadays? We go into a lot of detail, a lot of the nitty-gritty. I found it quite interesting, and I hope you do as well. Enjoy. Tell us more about those regrets. Which regrets do you have?
Okay, so our first game was very successful, and our second game, it is far behind our first game commercially. I basically have had a year to ponder why that was, and recently wrote up a post-mortem about it. So what are my biggest regrets in a nutshell? I think a lot of factors were out of our control, but one of the things we definitely did wrong was making a game without marketability in mind, where it's kind of hard to get the concept across easily. And that's something that was already in the concept stage and was kind of on us and not our publisher, who was like handed this game and we were like, hey, market this. But I think having designed the game already, we put them in a tough situation because it was kind of like this weird hybrid that's hard to grasp.
On your website, I think it says that your entire studio is focused on making detective games where your choices matter.
Mm-hmm.
So both your first game and your second game both fall into this category, right?
Yes, exactly. And our third game may also do that.
Got it. So that's quite interesting. So even though they're in the same genre, you say one was way more marketable than the other. So
yes.
It's not the genre. Then what is it?
Well, with our first game, we just went all in setting-wise on something that kind of screams detective gameplay, because we have this noir type setting and main character too. If you have a main character who's this like brooding, smoking, trench coat wearing dude, right? Then I think it's much easier to understand for the players what this character is going to do, right? It's like going to be some detective type. And our second game was much more like pure sci-fi, and sci-fi isn't necessarily associated with detective gameplay. So we had especially with the artwork, we had very little clues as to what you would be doing in the game. Even though both games provide a very similar like type of experience, the first one's setting and character designs and everything was much closer to that, like conveyed that more easily.
Got it. So the first detective game screamed detective game, and the second one did not, and that's why it was more difficult. And that's basically the problem in a nutshell that you've identified.
I think it's one of the big problems. Like I identified a few more as to what went wrong. I think the market also changed in between the two releases. The first one being in 2021 at the height of COVID, and the second at 2024 when a bunch of games were coming out that was still like funded during the COVID boom. So we kind of went with the highs and the lows of the market as well. It's impossible to tell if the release windows were switched, what would have happened. But I do think there are other issues that are inside our control, like the marketability, that made it harder too.
I have the two Steam pages open here on my second monitor, and like looking at the art is hindsight bias, right? It's always easy to say in hindsight, but I think I kind of get why the first one sold better. And I think it's also, my theory would be also it's got a bit to do with the 3D style, because you would think that 3D sells better. Typically, in my experience, 3D actually sells better. But I think one of the side effects of 3D is that it makes assets more expensive to make, and so you make less of them. And then the rooms look a little bit more generic and empty because you have to reuse more and so on and so forth. So when I look at the 2D screenshots, I think they have a lot of personality because there's a lot of detail. And when I look at your 2.5D screenshots from Between Horizons, they also look very nice. So don't get me wrong, right? I'm complaining on a very high level here, like expert level complaints. But I think they do look a bit more generic.
Yeah, I agree with you. When we first started out, we thought, okay, maybe we can have a production level quality of some of the games that like, for example, I don't know if you saw a game called The Last Night that was announced and never came out. In the meantime, a game called Replaced was announced that is probably gonna come out at some point. And those are also like mixing pixel art and 3D. But if you're honest with yourself, looking at these, the workload and the level of detail they have to put in every scene is kind of insane. So with the budget and crew that we had, there was just no way to achieve that level of detail in this time frame.
Right.
So like you said, it kind of ended up more barren than we anticipated.
Exactly. And I think detail is more important for some genres than others, right? For some genres, it might not matter. But for a detective game where detail is kind of the interesting thing,
yeah,
probably does make a bit of a difference.
I also think to expand on this 2D thing, a lot of people who like our games are from the point and click crowd, and they kind of recognize this is my type of jam. It's a 2D game, and it's kind of it's closer in style to point and click games than the 3D game that we made. So I think that's also a factor that people have a harder time recognizing this is the type of game I like, because oftentimes the games that are adjacent to ours are 2D.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah. So Lacuna taps more into the nostalgia factor and also
Yes.
the recognizability of people who have played lots of point and click. Got it.
Exactly. Even though that was kind of an accident. Like, we don't really play point and click games ourselves much. We didn't take them as inspiration much. And pixel art wasn't a nostalgic choice. It was a design choice, like a art style that we like. So, but we just attracted these people who were like, oh, this is a lot like X and Y from the 90s or the 80s even. And we were like, oh, yeah, I guess. But we did change a lot of things, and people are receptive to them. So you have like platformer controls rather than actually you never point or click. But to this day, every like third review we get says this is a great point and click game.
Okay. Yeah, I think the point and click genre at some point kind of disappeared, right? I remember there being a lot of point and click adventures when I was young.
Yeah.
Now there kind of aren't. I wonder why that is. Maybe because the formula evolved into sort of the type of game that you made with Lacuna, and it's just combining everything with everything in the inventory is maybe not the proper way to design games anymore.
Yeah. I think back in the day when not as many games were coming out and you couldn't just look up every little thing online immediately, you would like be ready to engage with a game and click every pixel on the screen and combine every item with every item and think that's peak gameplay, right? But like 30, 40 years later, we found other more entertaining ways and we have a shorter attention span. So I think that, we modernized on a lot of these aspects. You don't have an inventory. You don't do pixel hunting. You can just hit a button and see what's interactable around you. You don't have to click and wait for your character to walk there. Instead, you just play with a gamepad or a WASD, right? So a lot of these things that are like tedious about point and click games are not in our game, but at its core, it's still, very narrative and puzzly, and you have to think and read a lot. So I think it's the same people who like point and click games. At least there's a good overlap.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I also have one friend who really likes point and click and actually also really is into this old retro look and feel. So
yeah.
I can
they often go hand in hand.
Confirm that from my personal circle as well, yeah. I saw you also have some other regrets, though. For example, one related to maybe growing the team too quickly.
Yeah.
Was just that? You blew the team too quickly.
It wasn't even necessarily too quickly, or maybe it was for the wrong reasons or for no reason at all. Maybe like off the heels of our first game, we had, quite a successful launch. And then we were talking to our publisher again, to Assemble Entertainment, who published our first game. And they were like, sure, let's do the next game together, because they were happy with how it went, and we had the budget, and we were like, okay, cool. I guess that's what you do then. Like, when you're successful, you just like get bigger and you scope your next game bigger. And that was a little bit without rhyme or reason, even though the ways in which we extended the formula, they were all based in thorough game design considerations and discussions. At the end of the day, we didn't need to change the formula in such a way that it blew up the budget and the team and the scope and the runtime of the production. We could have improved the formula without doing these things. And it sort of it had side effects that in hindsight made it unnecessarily hard and not fun for me, because I was just managing a lot, and I didn't get to do the fun parts as much. And sort of my creative input was less on Between Horizons, just because when you have 7 employees, you have less time for that, and you let other people do get their hands dirty with the actual game development. But it also resulted in me not having much of an insight into the nitty-gritty anymore. So I didn't know how systems worked anymore. And whenever I would run into a bug while I was trying to implement content or test something, or had to send out a build for whatever reason, and there was an issue, I had to rely on someone else. I had to make a ticket and report, everything in detail and record footage. And as someone who works basically 24/7, because it's what I like to do and I pay myself, that would oftentimes result in me having to wait 3 days until a coder was free from their task, or because the weekend was over. So, with Lacuna, I could just grind at it all the time because I had my hands in every little system. And with Between Horizons, I kind of needlessly gave up a lot of the control, when we could have just made a game that improved on some things without having to do all this.
Would you say that back then you maybe didn't fully understand why Lacuna was successful in the first place, and thereby expanded on the wrong things maybe a bit? Is that a way to put it?
I'm not sure. I don't really know. I don't really remember what I knew or thought 3 years ago. But I will say that if I had to expand on the formula now, or make changes, with Lacuna as the starting point, I would definitely make different changes. I mean, that's the power of hindsight, like you said. But the types of changes that we made to the formula, even though they were well thought out, they added stuff in ways that wasn't necessary. When I would have maybe even cut down on stuff. I would have more tried to find the essence, what is the core and what makes that core fun, rather than thinking, okay, we have a working thing. How could we expand on that? Because we didn't need to expand. The thing we had was already good. I think if you look at some later, really, the Case of the Golden Idol came out after Lacuna and just overtook us in a short amount of time, even though it has arguably fewer features and it's more simple and more focused on the detective loop in a very, very elegant way. And I think I would have strived for elegance rather than adding stuff if I had to make the choice again.
That makes a lot of sense. It's always so frustrating as a developer, because you fall into this trap where you think if you put in more effort, it will do better, or if you scale it up, it will do better, right? So we have a working formula. So if we scale this formula up, it will do better, and that's just not how it works at all.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. You have to know exactly which corners you can cut and what you have to really nail. And I see this a lot with I play a lot of these very cheap horror games on Steam, and they oftentimes are quite successful. They have 4-digit amounts of reviews, or at least, like for what they are, it's impressive because the UI looks like trash. Everything is it's like the default UI. They just slapped it in there.
Yeah.
But as long as there is like somewhat of an atmosphere or some cool little gimmick that people like, nothing really matters. Like it does the horror thing that people came here for. And if they only paid like $5, a lot of people will come for just that. And you can pretty much like let everything else fall by the wayside if you have a cool little concept with the gimmick that people like.
With the knowledge you have now, what would you say? How do you find this essence of your game? How do you know what matters and what should be left out?
I can only speak to the detective genre. I think with the detective genre, we focused more on the story that we needed to, because while that is kind of cool, people will get invested in the story by having to think about the story either way, even if it's nonsensical or silly or not that well written. At the end of the day, once they figure it out, that is like the eureka moments, right? That's kind of what makes the fun in detective games. So I think the process of solving a case, and that isn't a puzzle or a riddle or a mini game. So like cases are sort of a different beast in that you have a lot of information that the player is presented with. Ideally, something that isn't very fun, I think, is the memorization of that. If you have to go looking for all that stuff again, ideally the game organizes for you in a concise way, and it's like a puzzle that you have to put together in your mind. And detective games are very elegant in that they don't really care how you arrive at the solution. They don't provide a template for you to communicate your thought process. What they do is they throw a bunch of stuff at you and let you organize that in your mind, and then you just communicate back the solution. It's like writing the answer to a math problem without any of the steps, right, in between. And this process, nailing this, and making the UI non-frustrating in such a way that you have everything right where you need it, and then just giving it to the player. That is kind of what a detective game is at its core. And we did a lot of other stuff around it. Like you can walk around and you have characters and you have choices and a story. And that kind of makes it unique. But like if you look at games that just do detective gameplay really well, like Return of the Obra Dinn or A Case of the Golden Idol, that are less focused on the story and where the story is always subjugated to the game design, clearly, even though the stories can be good, it really doesn't matter that much. Those are all much more successful than ours because they did this one thing and they did it really well, and they communicated oftentimes better than we do. Like if you have something like The Case in the title, is also very smart, right? We joke internally that our next game will be called The Case of the Mystery Clue or something.
Yes. So when you talk about detective games, you do mean games where eventually the player has to make a guess of who committed the crime or who was the murderer or something. So you have the entire game leads to that one moment where you put in that one name, essentially, right?
Yes. It can be like there are different ways to ask the solution from the player. One challenge is that you don't prompt them with the solution, right? There are some games that have moments where you have to like pick a solution. I think in The Wolf Among Us, there's this moment where you have to have this big revelation, but you only have 3 dialogue choices, and like 2 of them make no sense. So like you pick, and kind of a good detective game has to like do the opposite by having a like combinatorial explosion, right? You like, for example, you have the player put together a whole sentence that is like a closed text, and they have a bunch of verbs and a bunch of nouns, and it's kind of impossible to guess unless you really went through the whole thought process, and then you have this eureka moment, and then you just put in the 3 words out of however hundreds or thousands of combinations you can make with those words. This is when you really like, you have to make players feel clever. I think that's the fun.
And of course, you can have intermediate steps where maybe you need to guess certain sub goals or sub information that you need to solve the final case or something like this, right?
Yes, but one thing with detective games is that you can't really confirm or deny that a solution is correct until, how should I put this? One problem is that if you let players guess at partial solutions, and it's kind of easy to just like go through all possible solutions and just lock in the one that when the game tells you this is the correct one, right? Then you can just brute force your way through the whole thing. So detective games often have mechanics like Return of the Obra Dinn, where after you get, like, Return of the Obra Dinn, to those who don't know, is like you enter like an empty ship that comes back with everybody is gone or dead on board, and you have to figure out the fates of everybody that was on this ship. And you have a bunch of like verbs of like how they died, like stabbed or eaten or whatever, right? And you have to match the names to the people and the fates. And only after a set of 3 fates that you got completely right will the game tell you correct. So basically, you can only like guess at it a little bit when you are certain of 2 fates. And with the 3rd fate, you're like, is this like impaled, or is this speared, or is this stabbed? And you just go through it until the game says, yes, okay.
Yeah.
But you can't do this in small increments. Otherwise, people can just brute force it.
And when you say detective games where your choices matter, what does that mean, that choices matter?
So it means 2 things. For one, you can have choices in the story that are like usually moral gray areas where there's no real good solution, like Telltale games, right? It's like usually choosing between 2 defensible positions or 2 bad things in the story. And those are usually related to the core questions that the story has, like, or like the themes of the story. But also in our games so far, you could get the cases wrong, and the story will go on, and there will be repercussions. And the game never explicitly says your case solution was correct or wrong. And people really enjoyed that because it kind of keeps you on. And you only have one chance. The game like just saves all the time. There's no way of going back, and you just have to keep wondering, like, did I get the right suspect or something? And like 2 chapters later, you're like, oh no.
Oh, okay.
Right. So this is kind of a USP of our games, but is it worth it? Because branching content is such a pain to implement. And a lot of people left reviews saying, oh, there isn't even much branching content, which is untrue. Like, there's so many ways the game can evolve, but because it's kind of seamless, and I hope because it's well written, you think you're like in the one main storyline, because there's no clearly, oh shit, I skipped this whole cool part because I got this thing wrong. You still get the whole story. And at the end of the day, I don't know how much people really appreciate this, because other detective games who didn't do this, they did just as well or better. So what are we doing all this for?
Yeah, that's what I'm also wondering about, is if that's a necessary part of the formula, or if that's one part of the formula that could be simplified away. That's an interesting question. But that's also why some games have like these little pop-ups. Jonas will remember that, or
Yes.
stuff like that. Is like, okay, this does have some kind of impact, I guess.
I think so too.
Yeah.
They added this later because people were like, well, no, all my actions have no effects, even when they did. So they just put it there saying, no, your action does have an effect, because people didn't realize. But they really do. And we didn't do this. We never show a visualization. We are very obscure about, like, anything you tell anyone could have some ripple effect, and you just don't know. And I think that's really cool, but it leads to a lot of people not even knowing that it did.
I think the way to possibly solve that is in the onboarding process, right? You need to create one situation at the very beginning of the game where it becomes very, very obvious without having a pop-up.
Yeah.
That your actions do have consequences, and then maybe players get it.
Yeah.
But
because like Lacuna is linear in terms of like which scenes you get, with little exceptions, but with like a few. We have this in Lacuna. In the very beginning, you can like decide to go with a friend, and then you're late for class, and the teacher scolds you because you're late for class. So you're like, oh shit, okay, that dialogue option in the beginning had but in an environment where it doesn't really punish you, right? It's just to show you in a safe environment, hey, your first choice impacted the next scene.
You did try that, okay, and
yeah,
it also
we
didn't solve
did.
the problem, okay.
No, because people still don't know what later on really led to what, right?
Okay.
And in Between Horizons, it's kind of more obvious because there's much more agency on the player to begin with, because we have like a semi-open world that's like, we basically have like Metroidvania style unlocks, except you get the new areas with new cases rather than new gadgets, right? So you can just freely move around the spaceship, and you can show anyone any clue. So it's super open-ended.
Okay.
And you retain all the clues from the entire game, so they might still be relevant to a case much later. And we had to account for a million things to a point where it becomes impossible to account for all that, where we had the problem that players were like, well, they didn't account for anything. Like, I had this idea, but if you realize there's like 40 plus people on the ship, and you have like dozens and dozens of clues to show them, and you can talk to every person about every other person, about every clue and about every location on the ship, then we would blow up our localization budget to like unfathomable, like bigger than the production itself, right? To just have people react to every little thing. So people are like, well, you give me this freedom, but I can only like really do something with 5% of it.
I think this problem is probably in theory somewhat solvable with LLMs now, if you're clever about it.
Yes.
But yeah, I see the point.
Yeah.
But that sounds like a bit of an oversight on your end as well, then, to blow up the combinatorial space so much that you can only cover a small percentage of things people might try, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it is somewhat alleviated if we nudge them enough that they're never like super clueless and try to like just brute force anything, but it can happen. And then they will blame the game, obviously, because that's how it goes.
But also for the branching decisions and for the branching storylines. So players weren't like, oh, that's so cool that the story is branching. They were more like, where is it branching? That was like more the reaction you got so far, or?
It's just a downside that I mentioned. A lot of people do appreciate and notice it.
Okay.
I'm just saying, if you try to be extra seamless by doing like every story path justice, and by obscuring what like decisions actually do have consequences, then it might backfire in a way that people just never realize that that's what happened.
I think there are a lot of people interested in making story-based games. I'm also curious, what do you think what makes for a good story in a game specifically?
Well, in a game specifically, I would say it's player agency. I think that you can really give people something to think about if you put them in a tough spot, right? Like in a book, you can talk about something in depth, but in a game, you can make players responsible for their actions and what they say. So I do think that is like, difficult choices are generally what makes games interesting, and difficult choices in stories is what makes story games interesting, in my opinion. And what makes a story good in general, I would say, is an overarching theme or question that's like universally true, in my opinion. And that's usually like our guiding star when we write. Like every dialogue that you have, or every major story beat at least, somewhat contributes to the larger question or theme.
So for every game, there's like one big underlying question, maybe a moral question or something along those lines.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I often think about games in terms of appeal, right? In terms of what attracts players to a game. I often wonder this. Do you think that story does have an appeal factor? Do other people who play games for the story? And if so, how do you attract those players?
They do. The problem is that knowing if a story is good takes like 3 hours until you are like invested, right? If you have a game to sell someone because of a simple premise or gameplay gimmick or whatever, it's much easier. Like with story games, how do you tell them, hey, we have a good story? It's super difficult to convey, I think, like, as opposed to selling a game via an art style or a core mechanic, or even a premise. Like some games just say, like frog detective. You're a frog that's a detective, right? It's genius. It's brilliant. It's like what you see is what you get. Whereas in Between Horizons, if I were to like describe to you why the story is good, like we have to take 5 minutes, right? So it's a hard sell in that you're only going to know if you're interested and invested after you're already in the game. And this also makes it super duper hard for people to like, we barely go to physical events anymore. And if we do, it's more for other reasons because people will not play the game for an hour and start caring about the characters and start thinking about their predicaments. Like nobody does that at Gamescom, right? So I think story games are, for those reasons, kind of a hard sell in general. But otherwise, I think you sell them the same way you sell the other people on other genres. You try to get the tags right on Steam, and you try to get, into this crowd and this niche where the people already are, who appreciate story games.
But the people who come to your store page, will they ever say something like, oh, the story of this sounds interesting, I want to play it? Or is it that they buy the game for different reasons and then they're hooked by the story once they're in the game?
I mean, we try to make the things that are immediately obvious, like the art style, we try to make them at least appealing enough, so people will be then are not turned off by them. And I think that a lot of people look at game, like when I imagine somebody looking at a store page, they might look at the review score, they might look at games similar to what you played, they might look at this is owned or recommended by a friend. And many metrics that are not like really in your control, that communicate to the player, oh, this is that is the type of game that I like. I also think that UI is oftentimes a big giveaway to, oh yeah, okay, I see there's a dialogue UI. I like games, so I have to make choices or something like this, right? Or, oh, there's a clue thing UI, or there's like a closed text. Oh, I like games where I have to solve cases. But I don't ever think people buy it because they think, oh, the question at the core of this game is something that I've asked myself for a long time. Or, I don't think that the narrative premise, much more the setting. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I like sci-fi or I like noir. And that's my thing.
Yep. Yeah, I guess so. It's the setting maybe serves as a proxy for the story in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do think sci-fi is kind of tough. Like sci-fi is kind of very far removed from our reality, and like sometimes like very clean and clinical. I don't know how. I think it's a harder sell than some other settings. But maybe it's just because it's a hard, like I know there's a hard sell. Maybe everything is a hard sell.
I sort of have this theory that what makes things interesting is oftentimes making them oddly specific, right? A generic sci-fi corridor that's not interesting. Nobody cares about that. But if it's like very oddly specific, if it's like there are very specific cables leading to a very specific box that has like a strange design on it, and the floor tiles are like not typical spaceship iron floor, but it's like maybe a specific carpet. And it's like, there's a reason why this carpet is there. Maybe it leads to the chief's office and he wants to have like a nice carpet to his capsule or something. Then all of a sudden it gets so much more interesting, right? So oddly specific things are interesting. And I think those things are often lacking in sci-fi themes because sci-fi is so detached from what we typically see that we can't even really imagine how these oddly specific things might look like.
I agree with you. I think, like, for example, mouthwashing is sci-fi, but it has such a weird aesthetic of its own, and the whole setting is such a twist and not very clean sci-fi at all. That it's a much better like selling point than our very generic, clean. It's a spaceship, type deal.
And that's what I'm saying. Lacuna has this much more. It's like when you look at the screenshots, there's a lot more oddly specific things where like in environmental storytelling, why is that there? And you kind of see the slums and all of the houses and all of the specific people, the furniture of the houses you're in. And it's like not generic. It's like specific furniture. It's like This one screenshot I'm looking at is like very, very high quality chair, what it looks like. Paintings on the walls and so on. So,
I think you absolutely put your finger on something important. And like one thing that you said is like doing like level of detail and personality in 3D just costs more than it does in 2D.
yeah.
But also this had a few reasons. Like for one thing, if you grow your team, unless you pay very close attention or have a very strong vision keeper, things become a little more designed by committee, like as the committee grows, right? Because with Lacuna, the team was smaller. We had like one in-house artist, and I would very specifically write up requirements and often come up with the premise of the environments. I would be like, what if we have like a market, but that market is like built on bridges between high rises? Wouldn't that be like, I had sometimes these like, right? And a lot of this process was not as present in Between Horizons for a number of reasons. One, I kind of gave it away more, and I was like, hey, we need something, and for the gameplay, we need this and that clue to be there, right? But otherwise, it's a machine room. Yeah, right. And that's pretty much it. The other thing was Between Horizons, we had to develop the pitch and basically jump into the pre-production in parallel to Lacuna. Because you don't want to start thinking about your next game when your previous game comes out. You have to have a lot ready and basically be able to jump into pre-production on release day of your previous title. So this was already going on for a while, but we didn't have as much time. Lacuna was basically in pre-production for years before we even found the details. So it had a lot of time to rattle around my head and have developed more of a personality, right? Whereas in Between Horizons, it had a year during which we basically made the biggest part of Lacuna still. So it just had less time to evolve. And from the first moment on, we were locked into like a monthly deliverable schedule with our publisher. Whereas in Lacuna, we had like 5 years to just like try stuff out and shelve it sometimes and take it back out. And then it, would evolve much more organically.
Yeah, the design by committee is also very interesting and very true. Like the more like oddly specific is much easier to do when you're alone or in a small team.
Yeah.
Because when you suggest something oddly specific in a team, then other people are likely to just say, well, that's odd.
Yeah. When it's actually the odd ideas that are often like really good, like mouth washing, like what the ship transports mouth washing. Why not? Like what? It's so stupid, but it's such a good game and such a good story because it has this edge and this personality.
Okay, maybe this is the time to dive into studio history. Do you want to tell me a bit about how it all started and sort of the entire journey, how it's been like so far?
So I started out making music and sound design for games about 11 years ago. I lived in Munich at the time and started working with studios there, started freelancing in parallel to my master's. And then I joined Clonk Games that became Dedelic Bavaria and then became shut down. And basically I was in-house there doing gigs for them, audio stuff. But that way I kind of got a bit of an idea of what it is to like work in a studio and what can go right and what can go wrong. Through that time, I kind of wanted to do more, and I wanted to do video games because I was a gamer and I just could only do audio. But I've always kind of thought about expanding that. And then, with my co-founder, Yasmin, we started working on Lacuna in our free time in parallel and then founded the studio in 2019. And this was a good time because the state funding program was just started. We were just headed into the pandemic, which was bad in many ways, but not for the games industry. And we had, publishers had money to throw around at the time, unlike now, it feels like. So we basically had our vertical slice ready at that point. We pitched it to Assemble Entertainment. They signed us, which is kind of rare. We pitched it to only a handful of publishers, and one of them gave us a funding deal, which was really a big leap on their part. But it paid off. Like Lacuna was very successful, and then
nice. So when you say we, how many people were you back then?
We founded as 4 people. We had Yasmin and myself, who were doing pretty much everything except art. And then we had 1 artist and 1 programmer.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Mm.
And this was actually kind of a sweet spot. I think 4 people was really good. And then for Between Horizons, as I mentioned, we grew the team. We worked with Assemble again, and we were 7 people. And ever since, like, Between Horizons came out a year and a half ago, but it was supposed to come out even sooner. So we had to cover the production for a longer time. And we've kind of, been running on fumes for a while now. So we're okay compared to some friends. A lot of friends have shut down over the past few years. But we're still kicking, but we also scaled the studio down. We're only 3 people in house now, and 2 very regular external people.
Got it.
Yeah.
And that's also why you're maybe planning to run a Kickstarter for your next game?
Yeah, so part of the reason for that's a whole different story. So our next game is actually not Unburied, for which the Kickstarter is already, the Kickstarter preview page is up. Our next game is actually coming out in between, and we haven't announced it yet. We're going to announce it later this year. And we also happened to become a publisher this year, which was more of a opportunistic move than a big strategy thing. But friends of ours were making a game called The Great Sassanelli, and we really liked it. It's like this World War I setting where you manage like a traveling circus in Europe, and you have to make a lot of tough choices, which is what was kind of our deal. And it's really, really well written. And it was pretty far in development, so we decided to help them out to get it across the finish line and publish the game. So those 2 are coming up next, and then we're actually going to do the Kickstarter for Unburied. For now, this is all self-funded, but like I said, not like from our Scrooge McDuck, money bin. We are running a very lean operation now.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, by circumstance, but also by choice in a way, because, like I said earlier, I felt like expanding wasn't even the right move to begin with.
If you can break free of the funding treadmill eventually, that's like the goal for most studios that are in that place anyway, right? So
exactly. Now we're thinking we're going to make shorter games that we can bankroll. We're going to publish them more frequently. They're going to be cheaper, but if we're not giving a lion's share to the publisher, we're still going to get the same, amount per unit. But if the game is only $5 and not $15, a lot more people might buy it. So, we have a more frequent release schedule, and we might just make just as much money with the games. And they're cheaper to make.
Yeah, I mean, from a business perspective, this sounds like a smart idea, right? Make your entire studio focus on like one specific niche genre and like get very good at it, and then just pump out a lot of games.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea.
I'm not sure we're gonna stick with the genre. For the next game we will, but for example, Unburied definitely is outside of our comfort zone. It has like survival horror elements and stuff that we never really dabbled in, only like as fans. But because Unburied is kind of a bigger production again, we're gonna have 2, possibly 3 releases over the next 2 years that will help fund it, because no Kickstarter actually finances an entire game's production.
That's true. The thing is that whenever you dip your toes into a new genre, you kind of have to relearn what people in that genre actually care about, right? Otherwise, you'll repeat the mistake of optimizing the wrong things, expanding the wrong things.
Absolutely.
And this is, of course, possible and doable. Like, we also like dipping our toes into different genres, making different kinds of games. But it's a good question, though, right? How do you really find? I asked the same question earlier. I'll just ask it again and see if we can dig a bit deeper. How do you figure out what matters, especially when you get into a new genre that maybe you don't have as much experience with yet?
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about genres like survival horror, unlike detective games where your choices matter, is you can just steal it, right? Like,
Sure.
I don't want to butcher it. Like, good artists copy, great artists steal, or something. I feel like there are some things that just still work about survival horror. Some things have become kind of obnoxious. But when you look at how survival horror games are remastered, I feel like we've already figured out what we want to keep around and what we want to ditch. So a lot of really good survival horror games have been coming out that have a more modern formula. And if you do something like that, I'm not gonna, I wouldn't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Yes, there's like safe rooms and there you can save, and you have a magic crate that is everywhere, and you have limited inventory space, and all these things in survival horror, it is very formulaic.
Yeah.
And people, because this market isn't super oversaturated from where I'm standing, people will play it if it has a good production value. That's the hope. I mean, interview me again in a few years.
Yeah. You always know more in hindsight. It's always
Yes, exactly.
What I find weird about horror games in general is their obsession with monsters. Basically, they're usually just chase games, right? You're chased by a monster, you have to hide. Maybe sometimes you do some resource management and you have some weapons to maybe either fend off some weaker monsters or to scare away the big monster. And that's kind of every horror game is kind of exactly this way.
I wouldn't say everyone, but I think a lot of the more like recent successes are very much built around gimmicky monsters, like Poppy Playtime, right? You see their little dude as a merch in every corner store, and it's like crazy focused on that. There is this genre of like these games for kids with like a kids type setting that are actually really creepy, that have been making the rounds. But I think classic survival horror, in the vein of Resident Evil and Silent Hill, is a little different, right? It's like, I mean, of course you have iconic monster designs. You have like Pyramid Head and Nemesis or whatever, but at the end of the day, the draw is more the overall experience, this like feeling of dread and everything being always running out and depleted. And I have the theory that this like way of disempowering the player, because we like to see games as power fantasies a lot of the time, but survival horror games kind of do the opposite. Like you can barely fight back. You have like 3 bullets and 15 enemies roaming the area, right? And you already like are low on health and you have like no more pills and everything feels shitty, and you dive deeper and deeper into this complex and everything feels more, there's no way you're going to get out of this alive. And at the end, you actually do defeat the big bad and you actually do kind of find a way to overcome everything. I think it's just like delayed empowerment in a way, right? You like beat the player down, and getting up at the end is all the more like cathartic and empowering.
I wonder how much of that is like essentially a magic trick where programmers are just like, if you have more than 30 ammunition, I'm just not gonna drop any new ammunition.
Yeah, 100%.
And then as soon as it's low, we're gonna drop some new stuff for you or something.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trickery to this, to making things feel more close, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that like they have this vague indication of health, for example, and I think that the lower ones actually tank more damage.
Yeah.
Like you're okay, but you take 1 damage and it's like no longer, like, it's like orange, right? And you take 2 damage and it's red, and you run around in the red for a long time. You're like, oh my god, I'm almost dead. But in reality, it's like the half of your health bar is still left, right?
Yeah.
You can still take, and like this impression of making it closer than it actually is I think big part of horror games.
Actually, health potions and like ways to heal yourself kind of have the same effect, because it essentially splits your health bar into multiple parts, right? In Dark Souls, if you carry 10 health potions, you essentially have 10x the amount of health that actually shows up in this little HP bar.
Exactly.
But it feels a lot closer because, obviously, if you don't manage to heal yourself, then you're dead. So
yeah. And also, I think in horror games in particular, you don't want to like people to die, because that kind of takes you out of the experience, right? It's scary that you're afraid of dying, but after you died 5 times, it's gone. Like you know what it is, and you just like start to think of it more as a game, and you start min-maxing, and you just go through, and you tank all the hits, and then you just reload the save and all that shit. So I think making the player think they're almost dead all the time, but in reality, the monsters just like would awkwardly stare at you for 5 more seconds before you kindly move out of the way, right? That's kind of also a big part of the trickery. Like in those there's like haunted house videos on TikTok where people just don't run away from the performers. And because the performers, they won't actually stab you, they just like stand there because you're supposed to be scared of what they could do to you, right?
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of this magic is also in video games.
All right, so you're getting into that genre with your unannounced game, or no, that was the Kickstarter game. Is going in this direction you said?
Our unannounced game is more of in the vein of our previous games.
More detective story, like
Yep.
Learning from some of the mistakes. And what are you doing differently for the unannounced game, like without spoiling anything?
So it's more linear. We have some choices that have some impact on the story, but we dropped the open-ended stuff from Between Horizons, and we even dropped the thing that you can solve cases wrong and the story will do something else. At least unless we can like sneak it in like a low effort way, but probably not. We're probably just going to drop this because of the games that since came out. They just require you to solve the case and then you can move on. And it seems people are fine with that. We always had this mantra of not getting stuck was one of our big design principles. But in a time when everybody can just like go on Reddit real quick, you're never really stuck, right? So we were like, oh, it's going to break the immersion, but like, no, we just have to balance it well. And that's fine. So that's gone, at least for this game, because other games have shown that it's unnecessary. So it's more focused on the detective stuff, and the story is also more secondary. There is a kind of a story that's still deep. It's still a lot of yapping. It's still complex characters. It still has a message and a theme and all that. But it is less of a focus and more subjugated to game design.
And now you're just curious to explore new genres, or what's your idea behind the change? Or are you like maybe detective games is not where the big money can be made, or what's like what's your reasoning for the change in direction?
The reasoning is honestly kind of personal. Like after over a decade of dabbling in detective games, I mean, we've been doing it full time for like half a decade now, but Lacuna was already rattling around my head for 5 years prior.
Yeah.
I kind of want to do something else.
Oh, okay.
It's not a strategic thing, but we are kind of in games because it's the thing we like to do, right?
Course,
so I think having that dictate somewhat what you want to do next is fair.
Yeah, of course, that makes sense. Coming back to your article, let me quickly check what else you wrote about there. Suffering from success, like the first headline I see here.
Yeah.
You think it's a common thing that people struggle with their second game? Actually, the interview I recorded last week was with Katharina from Spellgarden.
Oh, yeah, cool.
They made Sticky Business, and then they made Ritual of Raven. And also their first game was, I think it's fair to say, much more successful than...
Yeah.
It's a common pattern. I think it's not super uncommon. Why do you think this happens, and do you think this can be avoided?
So in their particular case, we know each other very well. We actually worked on all their latest DLCs that came out and updates that came out. We did those.
You.
Yeah, we made them. And I personally ported everything to Nintendo Switch that came out at Sticky Business for the last few years. So,
that's funny.
Yeah, I think that they're in their case, if I were to criticize them directly, I think that they made a similar mistake to us. The Ritual of Raven doesn't really it has a vibe. Like Between Horizons has a sci-fi vibe. Ritual of Raven has like a magically mystery vibe. But at the end of the day, what the game is kind of harder to convey, and it's much more than just it's a little magic-y and mystery, because you have all these constructs that you can like program to do like your harvesting of your fields and stuff. And like it's all based on tarot cards, and it takes a lot of tutorials to get across and stuff. Whereas their first game, it's called Sticky Business, and you have a sticker business. It's pretty much it, right? So I think the premise is just much easier to convey. The other thing is also that their first game came out in a better and different market than their second game, which is not something you really control. I think they have some of the same issues that we have with our games. But in terms of like why your first game might be your best game, at least for a long time, is because sometimes your first game is the one you really wanted to get out and that had like a decade to develop in the back of your head, right? And after that, you're like, oh shit, we have a game studio now and we have to come up with another game. And that might not be as mature of an idea. But yeah.
It's not as mature, but at the same time, you want to scale it up and make it bigger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you run into some of these fallacies too, because the first game, you were maybe more full of doubt and scaled it small, and you're like, oh god, awesome, we like made a big ass game, and like now we can just do a bigger game. But yeah, I think there's a lot of traps you can fall into off the heels of a successful release, and I think it's difficult. Like I think no matter if you're making games or music or whatever, you're always kind of afraid that you peaked back then, right? You're like, oh shit, was that the best I could do? Was I better when I was younger? Was it lightning in a bottle or whatever? But I think that's rarely the case. I think you just have to analyze what works and what doesn't, and be honest with yourself, and just try again. A lot of studios had slumps in the middle or had a game bomb at some point, and their fifth game was their breakout success. I don't think there's a hard rule to this.
I think this was something I saw in your article as well, is that as a game developer, you never really feel like you made it, right? I had this feeling for a long time. I was like, at my first successful game, the feeling of, yes, I made it, it just never set in. It didn't set in enough after the second game, and now even after the third one, I'm still like, I don't know if the next one's gonna do well.
Oh yeah, yeah. You still have to put in the work. It never stops.
Yeah,
I completely agree. It's not like we were like, oh my god, we're on top of the world. It's not like we made a super successful game. But for a debut title, it was good, and we thought, okay, we have something, and we can expand on that, right? But that was already wrong. Like we shouldn't have expanded on it in the ways that we did.
Growth for growth's sake.
Yeah.
Is just a normal tendency to want to make your games bigger? Probably, right? It's like you want to make cool stuff. Bigger is cooler.
Yeah. I no longer think that, but yeah, that's the thinking, basically. Yeah. I think if you have a really focused small game that does one thing really well, that's kind of what I strive towards more now.
And when you say play it safe, but don't play it too safe, what do you mean with that?
So I think that that's more a catchy wording for the headline. What I like and specifically meant there is making sequels is also kind of hard, and selling them to people, especially when they are clearly worded as a sequel. Because in my mind, and what I've seen from some indie friends, but this is anecdotal, is that when people see that something is, you know, so-and-so game 2 or the Reawakening or whatever the hell, and they didn't play the first game, they will just buy the first game that goes on sale when, like, much more steeply when your second game launches, right? You have like a launch discount of 15%, but in order to like boost that, you put your first game on sale in a bundle, or you discount it by 70%, so it gets a lot of traffic and you can plug your other game. But people are like, oh yeah, okay, I've never heard of the first one, so they might buy it, but then they might never install it, and then they might never play it, and then they might never finish it, and like by the time all these gates are passed, the potential person who buys your game part 2 is like just a tiny percentage of everybody who like even considered your first game. So I really think that you hinder yourself if you even like as much as imply a little bit that it might make sense to start with the first one, unless it was like a breakout success. You have something on your hands like Little Nightmares and Little Nightmares 2, I guess that's fine, right? But even that, for brand recognition, specifically the Little Nightmares people, everybody knows they're now making Reanimal, even though it's not called Little Nightmares, because you can see their creative identity in it, right?
Yeah.
So especially for indies, I would always recommend do a completely different franchise. Or if you're going to do the same universe, maybe make it sound like an anthology. Like the Mimimi guys, they did like Shadow Tactics X, Shadow Tactics Y, Shadow Gambit. You see it's like Shadow and it's sort of this type of gameplay, but you never think, oh, I have to have played the other game to start this game, right? I think that was mainly what I wanted to get across.
Yeah, and this is especially true probably for story-based games, because for story-based games imply an order that you should play things in, and then as you said, if they like statistically speaking, it's just a lot of people don't finish games. It's just the way it is. And if they don't finish the first one, they're not gonna get to the second one.
Exactly, that's the thing. You're like making a game on purpose for incredibly small contingent of your potential player base, because it's the people who bought, installed, played, finished your first game. And all of these gates already led through like 5% of the previous amount of people. So like, why are you selling a game to these 5 people?
And that's interestingly different to how it works in the movie industry, probably, right? Because for films, it's like for big studios, it seems like a very safe strategy to be like, let's make Madagascar 4, I guess. Like people watch the last 3.
I guess if it's worth their time, I don't really know their reasoning, but I mean, in the case of Madagascar, you have a big success with the first one and you can ride the wave, and that plays it more safe than doing something completely new. But as an indie game who had like 1,000 or 2,000 reviews, which is good for an indie game, that still doesn't justify at all trying to make a sequel and getting this player base again. Because almost nobody who bought your game finished your game.
Yeah. I have to call you out on a similar thing I saw on your Between Horizons store page.
Yeah.
Because your trailer starts with a title card that says from the creators of Lacuna. And like, that's a bit optimistic that people know what this is, even though it's quite successful, right?
Yeah. I would never put this like on its own. We already start with visuals and it's sort of off to the side, so it doesn't delay the start of the trailer. We did this because we hoped that people would recognize us, but obviously, like you say, almost nobody ever heard of us, even people who might see this trailer. But surprisingly, every other review mentions I'm here because I played Lacuna and liked it. So the good amount of our player base does come from our previous game, and they follow us as a studio, even though we didn't make Lacuna 2. So we have those guys and new guys.
How did you bring them over? Did you like heavily market from your other store page, or did you like?
Yeah, I think it's mostly Steam internal traffic. We don't have big socials that people follow, and I think they just have Lacuna, and then they maybe follow our developer page. We have a decent following there. And we have like cross promotion between the games. Now Steam made it harder, right? Now you can only at the bottom of your page say what you want featured there, like more from this developer. But for the most part, since Between Horizons came out, it was still possible to add a little thing on your store page. So the first thing on Lacuna, which always got a lot of traffic, was also by Between Horizons because it's by the same guys. And I think this is the main driver. The thing is, our publisher is the one who put the games out on the platforms. And even though we can edit the store pages, we don't have access to the analytics data. So I couldn't tell you for sure.
Yeah, right. So now what you do is you just at least put a bundle at the very top here. I can see that it's possible to get both of your games in a bundle at least.
Yeah. And we did bundles with other games, so like Dark Side Detective and like games that people might like.
Do you know what's going on with the bundle meta on Steam? Because we've been getting lots of bundle requests recently. Is this like a very beneficial thing to be in bundles, or is it that you're trying to get visibility on somebody else's store page essentially, or what do you think? What's the reasoning behind that?
Maybe it's just bigger in the meta now because it's harder to plug your games on your own game pages, right? Because they removed the ability to just add in these blocks until the very bottom of the page. So I think cross promotion by going to third-party events and bundling with other developers are maybe more prevalent now. But that's just my guess.
And I mean, also one cool thing about bundles, I guess, is that they allow you to permanently discount your games, which you can't do otherwise, right?
Yes. Yeah. They don't adhere to the cooldown of the individual game, right? Yeah.
What do you think makes for good writing? Like on the, you answered the question on the macro level. You said like something have an underlying question. Well, if we zoom in on the micro level of what for example, what makes for a good dialogue in a game?
One thing that we strive for is that people speak like people. This is not necessarily something that's universally good or bad, but I think it's something that gives you a certain style and also accessibility and like authenticity. A lot of game dialogue is very corny and you have, villains doing the evil laugh and not behaving like humans, right? So we always try to have people have believable personalities and a way of speaking that is not only reflective of their personality, but also easy to read for everyone. So we don't like use big words to try to sound smart, and we try to not use stereotypes too much in our writing. Sometimes stereotypes can be something you can hook someone in with, like our noir main character dude, right? Looks like a noir main character dude. So it's like easily understandable on the surface, but then you can flesh that out and give it some twists and turns and some contradictions throughout the dialogues, like, and give him a more of a interesting profile. The other thing is, I think dialogues are a good way of conveying story rather than just prose. Also, I think I can write them more easily because I speak a lot and I hear people speak a lot. But writing in like a literary way, writing prose or poems or whatever, especially when it's not my first language, we always write in English. And I'm German, so we, it comes more easily to us to just convey everything in dialects. And they're more slow paced because every dialogue is a back and forth. It's one sentence or maybe two. You can have dialogues while people are doing things. You can have dialogues with multiple people involved. I think one of the worst case scenarios, and this is kind of something that we navigated ourselves in a corner with Between Horizons, is just two people looking at each other and just talking the whole time. Because in Between Horizons, you like go up to someone with like a piece of evidence, and then it unlocks a thing, and they tell you something. But when you look at how movies do dialogues, I mean, it's a budget question too, but usually it's while something's happening. They're going somewhere, or like something around them is happening and stuff. So making a little bit of set dressing for the dialogue that makes it more dynamic is also good practice. You can also do this by changing, like by having the player just, even if you just flip the sprite, like somebody is mad at someone and they turn away from them. Like you got very cheap ways of making the dialogue a little dynamic, or moving the camera over, or things like that. Changing the music up, like with this restrictive camera view that we have, we can't do close-ups of actors' faces, with very limited range of expressing things. So knowing how you can do things around the dialogue with the means available to you and using them a lot is also part of the writing process. It's like the mise en scène, right? It's not just the words to make it less boring, to just have people look at each other and talk.
Yeah, I see. A lot of games also quite heavily stylize their text, right? When somebody's angry, like the text is shaking or stuff like that. Also cool stuff.
We've done this only to an extent. We had big plans for that, but it was one of the things that kind of fell off throughout production. But that is really cool. Yeah, when people are angry and they yell individual words and they appear immediately, or things like that. Yeah, those are really cool, and we utilize them also. Not as much as we wanted to. And what's really cool, like the to me the like big like mastery level is when you start using the UI in like creative ways. Like, for example, in Celeste, there is this moment where a character like breaks out of their dialogue box. Like, you have the portrait, and this person gets super angry and like grabs the dialogue box and like becomes bigger, and is like this like super creative use of this type of shit. When you break the fourth wall in some ways, this is like super duper cool, but also a matter of budget and time.
I share your love for dialogue, and I think I can put a finger on it also why that is. I think the reason is that in dialogue, you can write a single sentence, but it can have a lot more meaning than a single sentence, because
Yes,
the person could be lying, the person could be saying something but meaning something different. Like, sometimes the reason you say something is like there's so much subtext in dialogue that, in my opinion, that's more interesting than just plainly writing things out.
absolutely. You always communicate on like multiple channels if you want to or not, right? You try to convey a self-image. You try to have an interpersonal message. Like the informational contents are just a small part of what you say at any given time. So I really think like keeping these channels in mind also makes for good writing, for sure.
I agree.
When you like people have an interest in conveying something that might be between the lines.
Yeah, you wanna. I agree. I think that's key. Actually, you wanna convey things, and you don't want the dialogue to just be info dumps.
Exactly. But this is a difficult line to toe, because in detective games, you sometimes have a lot of information you have to get across, right? You have to have a premise. So somebody broke in last night and they meddled with this, and we have these scanners. They work this and that way. So if somebody passed through here, blah, blah, blah. So we have to sort of strike a balance between providing information about the case and the ongoing story, and still not to lose everybody's personality in the process.
Have you played Outer Wilds?
I have, yes. I haven't finished it, but I look forward to doing that eventually.
Yeah, you should. But one thing I find interesting about the writing in Outer Wilds is that it was one of the first games that made me care about reading all of the dialogues. And the reason for that was because I knew that every piece of information in there, and also all of the subtext and everything, like the more I pay attention, the closer I pay attention, there's like a direct gameplay reward in that potentially. So if I read carefully, I might get an idea that helps me advance in the game.
This is exactly how we ended up with this story detective game combination, because we realized forcing players to go a little bit out their comfort zone and having to think and having to read by making basically a test intermittently about how well you paid attention to the previous bit is super fun. Actually, it really invests you in the story. If the story is the gameplay, and you have to pay attention. Like, this is basically a negative example of this is how I originally came up with Lacuna, because I was grinding some MMO. I was like playing Elder Scrolls Online, and I was just like click, like, yeah, some NPC gives me some blah blah blah. I don't give a shit. Where's the quest marker and what's my reward, basically, right? Because you get so focused on, like the things that actually matter to the gameplay, like what gear am I gonna get, how much gold am I gonna get, whatever. I don't care if your sister fell into a well, like where's the icon on the map. So you just go there and you don't really give a shit about the story. And I was like, what the hell am I doing with my time? Like, I don't care about any of this. But then there was a quest where I actually had to pay attention, and you come up to this shrine and you have to recite it something in the right order. And it was like a choice for me, and I was like, wait, what? I had to listen to someone before this? Oh shit. And then I did it wrong, and it spawned a bunch of super high level enemies. I was like, oh, that's so cool. There are suddenly stakes to the things people say to me. And so I was like taken out of this boredom, and I went back to the person. I was like, so about that poem, like, what was that about, right? And I was suddenly invested, and I started listening and paying attention, and when the dialogue mattered to the outcome, it was such like day and night switch. And I thought, what about making a game where that's the whole thing? You have to pay super close attention to everything everybody says, and the story is the gameplay because it's the mystery and you'll get tested on how well you paid attention to the story. And that makes people super invested and super immersed.
Right. But I think also the difference on how you're tested probably makes a big difference. I feel like if it's too much like a test at school where it's like fill in the correct answer here, then it's like can also be a bit frustrating because you're like, I didn't know I had to pay attention to this. Or
Yeah.
So first of all, you also have to get players into that mindset and make sure they know what they need to pay attention, or sort of prime them a little bit on that.
You can also ease them in through the difficulty. You have to give them some easy wins in the beginning, and then before they know it, they are taking notes on a physical paper, which a lot of our players do. They like pause the game and start writing shit down and taking notes and drawing connections on their notepads, which is not a level of investment that you're ready for when you start a game.
Yeah.
But we like turn the temperature up slowly. In the beginning, you have to retain two things and put them together. But once you're in that mindset, it can basically be like a test. It can basically be very straightforwardly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But there are also the tests where you don't even know that you're being tested, and then later you realize that there is a test, and realizing that there is a test is like part of the test. That's also interesting, and kind of the way Outer Wilds does it oftentimes.
That is really cool. We actually, in Between Horizons, we set up a mystery in the intro that is never part of the cases you get throughout the game. And it's sort of a hidden case that spans much of the story. And you get hints that it is even a thing you can solve without the game ever telling you. And if you show the right hints to the right people and get referred to the next correct clue, you can basically discover this case and solve the mystery that is the whole setup for the story. That other people will never know even was a mystery. Or it was solvable.
Yeah, finding that type of stuff is very rewarding.
Yeah.
And I feel like the trick is maybe kind of to have a lot of things like this in your game, because people are randomly gonna find different ones. Like I really like these Metroidvanias, right? For example, Blueprints was another one recently that I really enjoyed, and that game also has so many mysteries that you can solve. But there are so many different mysteries that you are almost certain to solve some of them almost by coincidence, because there's just so much.
Yeah.
And that gives everybody some cool moments.
I also think having a variety of mysteries to solve at a time, this was one of the things that we added to the design for Between Horizons, kind of makes it more digestible, because you can just, if you're stuck on a case, you can just try the other case for a bit. And maybe while you do that, you stumble upon a clue for your first case, or you just give it more time to think. And when you come back, you have like a fresh mind. So in the middle of the game, you can have like 3-4 cases open at a time.
Yes.
And this is kind of also a nice way to balance it, because people can just forget about a case if they are annoyed with it for a while.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that is actually part of the reason also why classical point-and-click adventures were often so frustrating, is because they had a very linear path of, now you need to find this item, then you bring that person this item, like a very strict order almost, in which you have to do things, like a little bit of freedom in when to do what, but typically you're very blocked on, you can't do this thing unless you've already done this thing, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I feel these games, they're often at their best when they open up quite a bit more, and they're like different things to work on, and you can kind of decide what you want to work on, and that way you're less likely to be stuck on anything.
Yeah, that was our thinking for Between Horizons, but opening up the map was also such a minefield of design problems.
I mean, if you have multiple cases, and then maybe also not knowing which clue belongs to which case, for example, stuff like that, right? You're probably gonna be careful.
I mean, we tried to make that part of the challenge. We were like, okay, we're going to really amp up the possible combinations and solutions to everything. Whereas in Lacuna, we had a preset amount of solutions for cases that just came like out of the ether. You just had words that you could fill in, they came from nowhere, and they were just limited by us, the developer, I guess. In Between Horizons, the clues themselves are solutions to the cases. So if you're looking for a perpetrator, any person clue you found in the game so far can be submitted as the solution. And if you're looking for the location of something, any room clue you found in the game so far can be submitted as a solution. And while that makes it more open-ended and kind of harder because you have to really think about everything, it also kind of makes it a little frustrating for players who are like, well, I said that the captain sabotaged the machine room, and nobody had a word to say about that, because they're always like, yeah, okay, we'll look at the solution of your case, and then later on they're like, okay, dude, that led nowhere. And they don't tell you, bro, what do you mean the captain? Are you insane? You're going to be stripped of your duties, right? So we never in a lot of cases, we don't account for possible mistakes, specific mistakes you could make.
Interesting. Yeah, so this could either have been solved with a lot of writing or maybe with some very careful playtesting to catch more of the common things people do.
We did playtest the game throughout, and we did account for some of the major ones. Like there's one case, for example, where a character, it's like a cold case from the past, and the character says, I was accused and I want to be exonerated. And there we had to account for the player finding the real culprit. I'm just going to spoil it. It wasn't him, so you can actually exonerate him. But we have to account for the player finding the real culprit, the player finding the wrong other culprit, or the player accusing him again and saying it was actually you. So we had to account for these three. And for the wrong other culprit, we had to sort of write our way around it by saying, well, this is implausible. Because the guy, we wrote it in such a way that the guy already knows who else did it, but doesn't tell you. He wants you to come to the correct conclusion, backed up by evidence. And if you say it, then he's exonerated. But so we had to account for three things there, right? And in some other cases, we also had to account for some things that players might do, sometimes even the order in which they talk to people about things. The dialogue logic is extremely complex because sometimes there's like multiple people involved in something, but we only have the big revelation dialogue with one of them. So the other person is like, okay, yeah, I guess the jig is up. I admit it, but go to that other guy. He will tell you all about it. And a lot of modules of dialogues can be set by different characters. And they will often be strung together based on what you already learned. So if a party already told you something, that module is no longer in the other person's dialogue when they come clean about it. We had to, and we did account for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But the infinite amount of stuff to account for is still so vast that players will complain. Obviously, and understandably, they will complain that you didn't account for that one specific thing they did.
And I mean, from making so many story-driven games with dialogue, do you have any recommendations for how you should organize dialogue from a code and logic perspective?
Yeah, we have our own internal dialogue editor that we wrote because it just accommodated exactly what we needed. I would recommend people do some tailor-made solution if they can, rather than doing a third-party plugin. Because more often than not, in our experience, they don't do what you need, or then you update Unity and something breaks, or you need to reach out to the developer and they're nowhere to be found. This is my general advice when it comes to third-party plugins. I would just avoid them if I can. And with dialogue tools, especially to integrate them into your logic and tailor them to your needs, just do your own. We have some basic features that I can tell you right now. They can check and set bools. Our entire game state is just a bunch of Booleans. And when you enter a scene based on the configuration of these Booleans, characters are present or not, or you have certain dialogues or not, and whatever. We don't actually retain a lot in the save games in terms of this character is positioned there. When you go into a scene, it's just like, is this Boolean true? Then the character is there, and if not, it's not there.
Okay.
And we do a similar thing with our dialogue logic. Basically, if you are in a certain game state, the dialogue is available or not. And dialogues themselves can check these. They can also set these. You can also have branches where the game goes into one or the other based on this bool. Right? So a big tip there, always account for all possible bool configurations, because sometimes you might think, oh, if this is true, we go here. And if this is true, we go here, which is fatal because, not one of them might, both of them might be false, right?
Yep.
So always do the opposite.
Yeah.
And then we have we call them gated nodes. We also have gated choices. So if a certain thing is true, then a choice appears. And if it is not true, the choice isn't there for the player to make. So gated nodes and gated choices are a big thing.
And all of these bools, I imagine the way a beginner would imagine this is like you have a C# file with lots and lots of bools basically defined as public variables or something. I imagine that's not the case. Are you using like a dictionary for the bools, or like how are the bools handled or stored in your system?
So different games had different approaches to this. With Between Horizons, we had a bunch of scriptable objects. But what I can't recommend is that you save things to scriptable objects on runtime. Just use them as like a initial setup thing. I'm actually not sure. I haven't worked on this part. This is mostly my co-founder Yasmin. But at the end of the day, they are all in our save game and read from our save game. That is after you started the game once, that is the instance where it's checked what's true and what isn't.
In your dialogue editor, do you have like a drop down for all of the bools, or do you type in the name, or how does it work?
For different things, for the bools specifically, we just type them.
Okay. Makes sense.
I know that a lot of programmers are like, oh my God, that is so unsafe. What if you mistype it? But that's never been a real problem. If I mistype it, I will immediately notice that the game doesn't do the thing.
Yeah.
Or if not immediately, then one of the other 1,000 times I will play this. I oftentimes just copy paste. It's fine. You could just use strings as IDs.
Sure.
And just type them.
You could theoretically even write a tool that checks spelling of your things or something.
Yeah, or something like that. Yep. For some things, we have drop downs, like for the saved existing dialogues in our database. I can drop down. I use a drop down, but if I type something above, it's like a search, and the drop down limits itself to the dialogues that contain that string. So we have a lot of utility by now, and you can see on a node immediately. There's a little lock on it. That means there's a condition to this node, or there's a little other symbol that means it changes a game state Boolean, things like that. But yeah,
got it. That makes sense. Also, the save file is basically just a bunch of bools.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It's the player decisions, but also how far you are in the story in certain paths. Like, had this and that dialogue is oftentimes a bool that is automatically there for every dialogue. So you don't get that dialogue again, because all our dialogues are unique. Like, unlike point-and-click adventures where you can just have the same dialogue over and over, ours are always unique, and the choices are locked in, basically. There's one exception, which we call interrogation dialogues, because it didn't make any sense for the player to not ask all the questions if there's no time limit to how long they can talk to an NPC. So instead of the dialogue becoming unavailable, the individual choices become everyone has a bool, and once that bool gets false, that choice is no longer available when you talk to the NPC again.
But you can't. Is that information recorded in a different system, or is it literally like if you don't write it down on your little notebook or whatever, then the information's gone?
Well, there's always a log of all dialogues you had.
Okay.
And there's usually highlighted words, which is a feature you can turn off, but oftentimes it helps people skim a dialogue again in their log. That's kind of a big part of the gameplay, that you reread, hey, wait a minute, this guy said something else from this guy, and then you compare their statements, or whatever. Somebody told you pin code for somewhere. You can just read that up again in that dialogue.
Okay, that's smart. So instead of having the immersion breaker of going to the same person again and having to ask the same question. It's like you just have a log of all of the dialogues you had.
Exactly.
That's a
We
cool
thought
idea.
we thought it was a good compromise because you also in detective games you have to be careful not to prompt the player too much with information, right? So we didn't want to just have a journal that automatically writes down what was important about this
Yeah.
dialogue because that should be up to the player to find and identify what's really crucial for your case.
I like that approach. That sounds very reasonable. So was that something you already did in Lacuna, or was that something you innovated for the new game?
No, it's in all our games.
Okay.
It's in Lacuna, Between Horizons, and in our third game as well. Yeah, we thought about making like it easier or something, but at the end of the day, people didn't really complain about it. You feel detective-y if you reread the log and you're just like, oh wait, what did he say? And it's fine.
It essentially feels like you have like an audio recorder with you all the time, and you can re-listen to the recording or something like that. So,
Exactly.
feels
We don't even explain that narratively. We're just like, you're an investigator type, and it's sort of a sci-fi world, so everything's recorded, whatever.
Which is honestly, we already live in that world. Everything's recorded.
Exactly.
It's not that much of a stretch. I don't know. Do you want to engage in some general theory crafting about how to make a successful game? Is that something you think about?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
What are your conclusions so far?
I think in nowadays, like climate, it's good to make a game with a premise that is quick to explain to people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, right? People don't have time to listen to you yap for a whole minute. Like in the era of For You pages and short form content, your game better be a concise package with a name and a key art and a premise and a core loop that all work in conjunction in a way. I think that's the main thing.
The case of the murder.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm not kidding. Like our next game, we're not set on the title entirely yet. We have worked with a working title for a long time, but the key art is just going to be like a big magnifying glass because every other detective game has that.
Yes.
You have this magnifying glass, and we redesigned our protagonist to have like a hat that looks like detective-y. Just we remade all the sprites. We were like, no, we're just gonna put on the detective hat and the trench coat because it's a detective game. And then we have like on the Kia, we have like files flying about and like it's good, like all mystery vibe.
Okay.
And I don't care, like this is generic because the non-generic stuff you only get to experience when you actually play the game, and all the character and personality and uniqueness we can put in the game. But like the character design, the key art design, the title, we try to streamline for marketability this time around.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, it's like the opposite of what we talked about earlier. That's where you don't want to be oddly specific. That's where you want to be generic on purpose.
Yeah. I think you can be oddly specific in a way that as long as the odd specificity is also quickly transported.
Sure. From detective.
Exactly. It's like, why a frog, right? Like that's kind of oddly specific, but it also communicates so much about the premise.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You also changed the capsule art for Between Horizon. I think that was like one of your little regrets that you realized later on needed some changing. What was the problem with the first one?
The first one is it just communicates sci-fi, which the title also communicates a little bit. Between Horizons. Okay, maybe it's like sci-fi-y. And then the key art was also vaguely sci-fi. You see like people in generic space uniforms and this ring spaceship in the background. And it could be any, like gameplay wise, it could be a 4X game. It could be anything. So we were like, okay, we have to sort of bring the mystery more into the key art. So we had our protagonist hold up a flashlight and look off screen into some unknown, right? And you have in the background, you have these screens that like are like maybe some complex information or some shit. We tried to convey that more. And we also just added a subtitle. We did it with Lacuna too. We just said a sci-fi detective adventure because that's what people know. You know what? I think that your trailer for Thronefall is brilliant because it's just descriptive. It just tells people what they're going to do. Like nobody gives a shit that it's a mystery for the ages or whatever. Just in our game, you go and solve cases. You get clues and you walk around and you talk to people about them and then you fill in the. I feel like our next trailer is. I'm going to steal this. It's going to be just Like we're gonna do a cinematic trailer and we're gonna be a descriptive trailer. And descriptive trailer is gonna be the first one where we just tell you what you're gonna do. Because people have this literacy and they know what they like. And if you just tell them,
Yeah, just explain it. Yeah.
yeah, it makes your life so much easier.
And also, what I found is that explaining the game in your trailer forces you to have a good structure for your trailer as well. It makes you show the correct things in the correct order because you're you basically show the footage in the same order in which you would explain it to a person. So
Yeah.
even if they watch it without the sound, even if they don't get your voiceover,
Yeah.
you still kind of get the explanation because you still show the explainy things in the same order.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
I mean, you do have to account for people watching it without sound, though, because a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I wanted to say that I think it also serves as sort of a lightning rod for bad reviews because you're so upfront about what the game is that people who don't like it will also just not buy it, and that is kind of good.
That's good.
Right? I think a demo also plays this role very well. I think if we didn't have a demo out for our games, there wouldn't be north of 90% positive, maybe, because some people go in with the wrong expectations. I mean, a lot of people just buy it without playing the demo and then end up not liking it maybe and never review the game. But I think people who really are invested and want to know for sure, they'll just play the demo. And they are only going to buy and maybe review the game if they already like the demo. And all those others will just shelve it. And I think a trailer that's just super upfront and honest about it will exactly not just address the right people, but also shoo the people away who are not going to enjoy it.
Yes, which is something you actually do want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Thronefall, we had the problem that people assumed we're like a classical RTS game where you can place buildings wherever you want.
Yeah.
So most of our negative reviews are just people complaining about the fact that they can't place their buildings wherever.
But you say it in the trailer, right?
Sure, we say it in the trailer. We say it in the description. So on.
Yeah.
I think Chris from How to Market a Game already explored this when he did this case study on watching people shop for games on Steam, and he was like, people
with an eye tracker.
Yeah, people watch it like watch a couple of seconds from the trailer, and they look at your screenshots, and that's how they make your decision. They don't read anything. It's like,
yeah, that's what I meant earlier when I said I think people look at a lot of stuff that's kind of not the first thing we think about. It's like, oh, it's similar to these 3 games that I liked and a friend recommended it. And maybe from the screenshots, they try to glean from the UI if it's the type of gameplay they like. But that's pretty much it. Like, who sits down and watches 2 minutes of trailer? I think the people who are engaged enough to do that or play the demo, for those people, it's great that you have a very clear way of communicating what the experience is.
Yeah, people appreciate that upfront honesty when they go look for it, because that's when they want it. Yeah.
Exactly. And those are the people who are invested enough to write a review too.
Yeah.
Like, they have enough time on their hands to watch a trailer. They'll have enough time on their hands to write a review.
Yeah, good point. On how to make a successful indie game then. So one thing we kind of got out of this is you want to make sure maybe that your screenshots do a good job at communicating what your game is also. Like, that seems rather important for making sure the correct people download the game. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially the first 4 on Steam that you see when you like have a game in a carousel or when you hover and preview it, there's 4 screenshots. And I think that those should show off the core experience and at the same time, maybe a little bit of variety already. They don't look all the same. They're not too small in the preview window. So ideally, it's not super zoomed out. I think there's a lot of rules to good screenshots and especially the first 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an art in itself to get those right. You want all 4 of these to look very different so that it looks like a lot of variety and
exactly. But at the same time, communicate the experience.
Yeah. And there's so much contradicting goals that it's really difficult to juggle, because on the one side, as we mentioned earlier, you kind of want to make things like unique. You want them to be a bit oddly specific, but then at the same time, you want people to instantly know what's going on in your screenshots. So it's a difficult line to walk for sure.
I think the way games do it is by making the oddly unique thing, like I said, easy to understand. Like, look at No, I'm Not a Human. It's a clunky title, but it's like this dude looking at you that looks kind of strange. In the key art, the title is No, I'm Not a Human. It is catchy and weird and unique, but also this is the core gameplay. It's like, oh, you have to like figure out if you trust people, if they're humans, if you let them in or not. And even though it's oddly specific, it is also quite easy to understand. I don't think it's necessarily contradictory. You just have to be pretty good at it.
Yeah, and it's something you probably do need to design for a bit, or get lucky that your game just fulfills that criteria.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, our games that we have planned now already kind of failed at a little bit. Like they're not completely streamlined with that in mind, but definitely more so than Between Horizons. So I think it's also a good way to have a game be successful is to make a really good game.
Yes, yes, I agree. But also, I think knowing these things and like thinking about which screenshots are they going to be on the store page, which expectations are going to people have, thinking about that rather earlier than later, I think is a good idea. And even
Yeah.
if your game isn't like set up perfectly for this, if you realize this early enough, maybe you can at the very least specifically design a couple of scenes in your game to explain
Yes.
the gameplay.
Yeah.
So even if it's like, damn it, my game kind of doesn't explain itself very well, maybe you can make things a bit better by having specifically making some scenes in your game to serve that specific purpose. Or,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. We are actually thinking about like trailer scenes also because our games are super talky and static. So we need to have some action that we can cut into the trailer. So basically you see at least half the action scenes from our games in the trailer just because something's in motion and the trailer isn't boring this way. Even we absolutely wear on our sleeve that it's a narrative game. There's a lot of thinking, a lot of talking and reading. People know this, but having a trailer of just reading and people talking just doesn't work, even for this type of game. So we have to have like a minimum amount of action scenes that just look dynamic to cut them together, if only for the trailer.
That's so true. A lot of games struggle from this. Also, this is not just a common issue with narrative games, also like card games. Or like all games with static screens have this problem where it's like, how do you make a dynamic trailer when you have a static screen that not much motion is happening on? It's like very difficult.
Yeah.
And for those types of games, specifically planning for your trailer scenes, I think is a very smart idea. I think that's a good idea that you're doing that.
We have to. I mean, you can make like, I think the trailers for the Case of the Golden Idol are quite good. Their problem is that they have extremely static scenes that have very little animation and they just zoom across the UI and cut it to the music. Like, you can make even UI look kind of interesting if you have a good hand for this type of thing, but it is an uphill battle for sure with this type of game.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what else do you need to make your game a big hit?
Well, commercially, I would say it helps if the game doesn't have to make €1 million back in the first place to be a commercial hit, right? If your game cost 50,000 and you made 100,000, that's good. So if you have a smaller budget to begin with, then you have a higher likelihood of having a commercial success on your hands. So I think making smaller games, scoping smaller, not moving across 5 years of sunken cost fallacy really helps. Getting concepts out early, testing early with people, being honest about what sticks and what just doesn't work, even if you liked it. This type of thing, I mean, makes good games, but also makes commercially successful games.
Is 3 to 4 people just the general sweet spot for indie teams, or do you think it's hard to generalize?
While it is hard to generalize, it is a good sweet spot for our type of games that we're working on now. And also, I think, and this is my hot take, mid-sized teams are struggling in particular at the moment. If you have like 10 to 30 people, your burn rate is really, really high. But what you said earlier, when you said you think when you put more effort into a game, it will sell more units, then you are sorely mistaken, right?
Yeah.
So when you think of breakout successes, they aren't good games because 20 people worked on them. They are good games because they are good games. And people generally don't care if you had to spend 5 years and 10 million euros to make it, because at the end of the day, the things that make games good are not tied to the budget. And I really think that a small team has a much higher chance because there's like less overhead and less design by committee and less money going around, to do something that goes beyond expectations for the small amount of money that went into it than a mid-sized team. I mean, and then of course there's like double A upwards. I think they have other ways of monetizing their games with like live service content and skins and what have you. And I think that is a whole different world. But as an indie, especially nowadays when competition is fierce, people are pumping out quality games everywhere, and you see them fail, and you're like, oh, holy shit! Like this has really good production value, and it like drowned at like 50 reviews. You have to really think twice about throwing €1 million at a concept. So I think small games, at least in the current climate, and small teams are a good way to weather the storm.
Yeah, I've never really done the math on this. Like, what's the rough cost you would expect for a person on your team per year? Maybe something like 40,000 euro, 30,000, or it's like the rough range.
Oh,
In your estimate, it's not specifically for your company, but what do you say would be a reasonable number to calculate with?
well, even if you don't pay yourself well, like even if you have like paying your team a junior salary, everybody gets like €2,500 gross. That costs your company much more than that. It costs over 3,000. That means the salaries for 3 people are around 10,000 a month, right? So for a year of
10,000,
production,
120,000.
yeah, for a year of production, you pay around 120,000, and you haven't paid for an Office or a Unity license or a Photoshop license or anything. You haven't paid for your accountant for your yearly tax statements. You haven't paid for shit, right? So 150K for a 3-person studio per year is pretty normal. So if you work on a game for 3 years, you're gonna be out of 500,000, and you haven't even paid for QA, you haven't paid for localization, you haven't paid for marketing. So you haven't paid for any freelancers. So if you need tech art and you don't have that on your team, if you need concept art and you don't have that on your team, that's going to cost you extra. So I think a 3-year production on a team of 3 people costs €500,000.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, like making 500,000 on a game is difficult, but if you 3x that team size, then there's a different calculation entirely. There's one rule: you should never do math on video. We broke that rule. I'll probably in the edit find out that we made some math mistakes here, but
I do a lot of this math because I'm the business guy at our office, at our company. So that's the unfortunate reality. I mean, also,
did we calculate with 10 people or with 3 people though? We're like
that was 3 people.
3 people. So,
yeah.
No, you're right. So one person's like at least 3,000, and then 3 times 3 is like 10,000 per month. Yeah. Like 120,000. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's wild. That sounds so expensive. 500,000 for 3 people for 3 years. That's wild.
That's why I specified earlier when I said that your audience is literate in a way, because they are literate in the way that they know what kind of games they like, but they don't really know what goes into making a game. They don't know what it costs. They don't know how much work it is. And I think a lot of people would be extremely surprised at the budgets of even the smallest productions, because if it's your livelihood and you're like your full-time job and you have to like pay for stuff, then the salaries just blow up the budget immediately. It's like 95% of your expenses. And in a country like Germany, where, I mean, thankfully we have a good healthcare system and all, but that is very expensive too. And we have a quite high tax burden as a Unternehmergesellschaft, the type of company that we are. we pay like over 30% of our incoming money. Like,
or Steam takes another 30%.
Steam, yeah, that's the other thing. The amount of units you have to sell in order to break even is crazy when you think about, discounts, regional pricing, refunds, credit card fees, Steam cut, all that type of thing that goes away. When I calculate this type of thing, I usually go with like 35% of the sale price ends up reaching us. And then, oftentimes you split that with a publisher and they get 70% of those 35%. So you make pennies on the dollar for every unit sold on average.
Yeah, the 30% I can plus one that rule. That's roughly the rule of thumb that we arrived at as well.
Yeah.
Independently of you, so confirming that.
Like, there you go.
If somebody buys a game for €1 on Steam, then 30 cents end up on our bank accounts. And in the case of Grizzly Games, that would be 15 for each because we're 2 people at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This type of math makes you think twice about committing to a project that takes so long, especially when it's not proven. I think you're also someone who really appreciates the iterative nature of arriving at a good formula that is worth your time and, testing it early and honestly axing stuff before it costs you a bunch of money. So yeah,
that's a good point. A big part of making a commercially successful game is to keep your costs in control as well, because the bar for how successful your game has to be rises with what you spend on it.
Exactly. Yeah, you're commercially successful if you break even and then some. If that's your definition, then don't make it so hard to break even.
Yeah. So that's why it's like extra important to focus on that core of the experience and not have any fluff, because it'll have basically a win-win. It makes your game better, it makes your game easier to understand, but it also makes your game cheaper. So it's like a double win.
Exactly. Just focus on the thing that makes it good, and people will appreciate that, and you won't have to spend money on all the other stuff.
That checks out. Anything else? What do you need to make a successful game?
This is really gonna get me some hate. But in terms of your team composition, of course, it's you have to really decide if you are able to work with people who aren't already seniors themselves, right? There's this meme going around about like, who wants juniors to have jobs, and then who wants to train these juniors, and everybody lowers their hands, right? So we adopted a policy that we're just not taking any interns anymore, even though I really like sharing resource and onboarding people and giving people excitement for the thing and sharing wisdom and everything. But at the end of the day, a 3-person team of really experienced people is madly efficient. And in the past, we sometimes brought people on who we couldn't dedicate the necessary resources to help them through the processes and onboard them properly and all that stuff. I really think that, I definitely don't want to pull the ladder up behind me, but since we are already struggling, right? We don't really have the time to hire juniors or train interns and any of that stuff. And one way to become more knowledgeable is just to do your own thing, that I would encourage everyone to do to some extent. Of course, you can't immediately live off your own thing. It's taken many years for me too. But at the end of the day, that was also a learning. Like, really be selective who you work with, who's your subcontractors, who you hire, especially. It sucks, but it is also a big consideration.
Yeah, and I also have an opinion on this. I'm like, people typically like to work with people who are as talented as them or more talented in indie teams, right? So it's like, it makes the most sense to team up with people who are either as skilled as you or who are more skilled than you. So it makes sense that if you have made a bunch of successful games and so on, like, I get lots and lots of emails of people who are like, hey, I want to team up with you. And I'm like, maybe not. And that's, you can look at that like it's like pulling the ladder up behind you or whatever you said, but I don't really see it that way. It's like the best thing you can do to find better teammates is to keep improving your own skills. And I think luckily in the indie space, you can do that quite easily by working on your own stuff and like earning your own skills, and that will give you access to other more talented people. Like it's just the way it works. The more talented you are, the more you'll attract other talented people who want to work with you then.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
It's very accessible nowadays to just screw around with whatever tool of your choice and just go at it. That would also be my advice to anyone starting out. Just like do the thing. Like nothing trains you better at doing the thing than doing the thing. Like not even learning anything abstract. Like if you want to learn programming for games, try to program games. That's right. There's also a learning that we've had with people who have good qualifications and might be better, like a better programmer than me, for example, and know more about programming and more concepts and might even have a degree. At the end of the day, having shipped a few games, you kind of have a better grasp on what's important about, like what can be just held together by some duct tape and a prayer, and where it doesn't really matter if it's clean code or not, because the gamers won't care. If it's not player facing and it kind of does the thing, then it's good enough.
Yeah.
And if you don't have this like academic mindset, a more pragmatic one that just comes with experience, even if people have good qualifications and are very intelligent and very good programmers, having 10 years of game development experience is just gives you other things.
Right. So that's what I also agree to. You want to practice exactly what you want to get better at, right? If you practice something slightly related, of course, there's knowledge and wisdom that transfers over, but a lot of it also doesn't. Like if you're like a software programmer or something, there are obviously skills you can use in games, but maybe you'll tend to over-engineer things that dirty code would just do just fine, right? So
and sometimes it's even just knowing that the engine can do that stuff for you. We've had games where we like, for one reason or another, joined the code base later, and we're like, why did they write this weird loader or management system or whatever? Like, just use the thing that Unity does already. It's so much wasted time to write a feature that is just already in the engine.
Man, that's knowing what's possible is becoming such a crucial skill. And even more so now, because you can literally ask an LLM to code something for you, but only if you know that it's possible and if you know that it exists. So like knowing what's possible is the biggest thing you kind of need to wrap your head around. Like,
absolutely. I also have like I code with Cursor sometimes, which is like an AI writing code for you, and I feel that it does better in areas where I already know exactly what I want, and I know how I want the implementation to be, and I know the exact words for the things, and then it actually does a pretty good job.
Exactly. But if you're like, I want the save system to work, make it work, and you're like just too vague about it, like that's not gonna work, man. Like,
exactly.
But if you know what's possible, if you know the correct words for it, if you even kind of know what architecture you want to have for it under the hood, and you explain that, it's crazy. It's such a time saver, also.
Yeah. And then you develop meta knowledge of what AI is good for and what it can't do in the experience with that. Like, for example, I found that when it comes to like editor scripting and tools, AI is pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Like those are things that it does for us at this point. But there are other things I would never let the AI touch, because it would just mess it up and go in circles and fantasize weird shit, in my experience.
Yeah, that's true. I'm more and more coming to the conclusion that knowing what's possible is such a crucial part of the wisdom that you acquire in any discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just oftentimes something you just have to learn over time. It's rarely taught Like, just that's why just making games is the best way to get better at making games, I think.
Yeah, and exactly what you said happens so often, that you write a custom thing and then you find out there's a built-in solution for it.
Exactly.
Or there's somebody who wrote like a very good plugin that like everybody in the industry uses, but that you didn't know about. Like,
yeah.
For example, I think a lot of people use Rewired for input in Unity because it's like just better than the Unity input system, stuff like that. It's like, you gotta know to know.
Yeah, or Lacuna was ported by an external studio, and they just plugged in Rewired, and we were like, "Oh, what's that?" Right? Yeah. But that's just like you said. That's just something you learn at some point because somebody mentions it or does it in another project, and you're like, "Oh shit, that's cool."
Let me quickly finish scrolling through your article here. Focus on your strengths. That's obviously also good advice for making successful games. To lean into your strengths.
Yeah, it's how we ended up making narrative games because both my co-founder and I have a background in literature. So I have a master's degree in comparative literature and she has a doctorate. So we were like, we're probably good at yapping. We're just gonna like write a lot of texts. We're not gonna make a physics-based game because we're bad at math. So,
I mean, you don't need to be that good at math. Like, engine does most things for you, right?
Yeah, maybe. We haven't ventured in that area yet, and we might never because it's just so far like across the spectrum from where we are slowly getting good at now.
What's your opinion on marketing? Does it even play a role, or is it mostly the game anyway?
So I think there was like a time when people were all saying like this basic the common sense advice, like, oh, game developers, they always just make the game and then they don't market it and they forget it. There was like a few years ago, I remember this going around a lot, and then they don't think about it early enough and they don't launch their sell pages early enough to farm wish lists and build hype and whatever. And everybody had an opinion on that. And I feel like that is true to an extent, but nowadays it's also my impression that a lot of people do marketing and still don't have any success. Like they try to get the word out all the time. They post about it. They hire social media managers, or they are themselves publishers or PR agencies, marketing agencies, and they have projects under their belt that end up dying at 14 mixed reviews. And I'm like, what's up with that? I thought marketing was so important and it's your whole gig, right? And I actually talked to a friend recently who basically had a similar experience with PR and agency. And they were like, hey, your marketing doesn't actually convert to wish lists at all. Like notwithstanding that wish lists might not even convert to sales, but like pre-launch wish list is like your one metric that kind of shows you how the launch might go. And they were like, you guys, like,
not working.
it's not doing anything, right? And they also didn't, like, in German we say they also were just cooking with water, right? So they were just like, yeah, I don't know, like do an Instagram post, maybe do like a mailing list. I don't know, like all our campaigns are not working at all at the moment. And I think that's a shift for multiple reasons. One is that we have a overabundance of games coming out. The number is super big, especially post-COVID. During COVID, everybody had money to throw around. Bunch of productions were being funded. They're all flooding the market now. People's access to tools and the quality that some people can just make alone at home is super high. So we have a lot of high quality stuff coming out and not standing a chance. And I also think that the shift to like For You pages has changed the landscape a lot, because you don't really build followings anymore the way you did. Even if you have a big following, they might never see your stuff. Like, I swear that a lot of people, the last time I saw them is when I hit the follow button on their account. And that was like a year ago.
Never saw them again.
Yeah, because the algorithm, who goes on the following page? You will go on the For You page and you just like get served up stuff. And then maybe you have 10 million views on that one video, but you have 200 followers out of that. And who closes TikTok and then goes to wishlist a game? I feel like it can happen. It can work well for some people. If you go super viral, then you have like a critical mass that enough, like that 1% of all people is 1,000 wish lists. So that's really cool. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's harder to cultivate a fan base with this type. And everybody jumped on the train, right? Instagram is a For You page now, basically, just a worse one. And I think that this is harder to build and cultivate a fan base that actually recommends your game to other people, because they might never see you again when they follow you. And most people who do see you don't even follow you, which is a blessing and a curse. So I think the rules have just changed a lot.
Yeah.
And if you know how the new landscape works, I think doing good marketing isn't rocket science. I think if you know how to like quickly hook an audience, if you know how the editing works, you have the subtitles with the individually highlighted words, for people who watch without sound, or people who just like something moving on the screen. You have very quick hook, and you know the types of hooks. Like you start out with a sort of blatant untruth or with a very provocative question, or just frame it in such a way that people want to watch the end. If you just start, put a finger down, and then you talk for 2 minutes, right? And people just want to know, you have these like weird hooks that work well on the For You pages. But I kind of haven't jumped on that yet, because I often feel disingenuous and I don't like it. And I want people to like the stuff that we do for the stuff that it is. But it's probably wise.
I mean, that can also work, but that's also why I personally have the feeling that the marketing nowadays depends more than ever just on the game itself. Because if you have a game that's easy to understand and marketable, then it automatically works better on For You pages. And exactly. For You pages and algorithms is where the visibility comes from nowadays, right?
100%. And if you have don't be shy to just put that premise into every video at the start. Chances that people go over your page and watch every video and they are like infinitely low. So the higher chances that whoever sees your video sees something from you for the first time. So just put the thing at the top. Say, we're making a game about whatever the fuck. This is your first sentence, and it's like hook. That's the same for all videos, because you have to pick up people who never even heard of you and might never see you again. And if you have a game that lends itself to that, that is really good. And if you don't, it's an uphill battle. I think you can still use all these tricks. But another thing that kind of works in an era where everybody tries to market to you is like authenticity and rawness and like scruffiness, in a way where when it's not polished, it's actually kind of gonna keep people sticking around. Like if you sit in your car and rant to your phone camera about the games industry, I'm pretty sure 160,000 people might like it. But if you just post your cinematic trailer in vertical, people feel marketed to. They will just not care.
Yeah, sure. And you need the correct personality for some of these things. Like for some people, you can listen for them rant in their car for hours, and for some it's just like not really that interesting. It's like depends a lot on which possibilities you have. Yeah.
I agree, but I also think that that's nothing that a publisher or a marketing or PR agency will ever provide to you. They don't have the guy that rants into the phone. It has to be like something personal from the developers. And you're lucky if somebody on your team is that, or you can hire someone to be that. But I think the type of like clean cut marketing with a marketing plan and beats and how to build up the hype and leak stuff and reveal stuff and then post all this cookie cutter like engagement bait, or which one is your favorite design shit. I think that's just on the way out, and I think paying people for that is not worth it.
Yeah, I think there's one thing that I think might still be worth paying for, and that is like content creator outreach. If you have someone who's like very good at content creator outreach and already has some good contacts and so on, I think that's something that's potentially worth it, because that feeds into the creator economy and into the algorithms in a way.
Yeah, and the content creators, they often try to have their own viral moments, right? If you have a game, especially like lately, this like friend slop titles, like Lethal Company or Peak, they are just meant to have viral moments, and content creators go viral themselves, and they play these games in the hopes of having a good clip that's going to do numbers on TikTok to increase their own following. So you basically can leverage that. And but that's only if you make a game that is good for this type of content, which we really don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also a problem you have with story-based games, that they're more difficult on For You pages, right?
For sure.
You have like, look, we made new text boxes today. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's like, trust me, bro. Like if you stayed on this page for half an hour and I explained the whole premise to you and what the characters' motivations are, you would be so hooked. Like, how do you convey this?
You gotta get them with the setting. So the first sentence would be something: we're making a detective game in a sci-fi world where cats have conquered space, or something like that.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah. That's definitely much easier than the narrative premise.
Yeah.
I just want to add, because you said creator outreach, there are like tools and platforms and services for that, for you to do it yourself, which is something we're more likely to try out than pay some agency to do that.
Yeah.
Like, that where they have like, oh, there are people who plays games that are tagged similarly to yours in our database, and they're this and that big, and they facilitate aggregating content creators who might be interesting for you, and facilitate reaching out and managing the keys and all that stuff. I think that's actually more interesting than having someone else do that.
Yes. There are different tools like that. For example, one that used to be quite popular is Keymailer, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But I think there are better solutions now, and I think the solutions that work a lot better now are just like data mined databases of actual streamers and content creators, and you just reach out via their normal email. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we were, like, from the conversation we had here, it feels like we're quite aligned on how we think about making games, because it's quite interesting to find out that even though we haven't really talked before, we have a lot of very similar opinions, or arrived at a lot of very similar opinions. It's interesting to see.
I agree. And even though we make very different games,
yes,
I think the things that are true about making a good game are kind of universal.
Yeah,
I even agreed. I even agreed with the best game design award. I was like, no, Thronefall deserves it, because I was very surprised because this was the one time we met before, was when we were both nominated for best game design. And I thought I was very vindicated that we got a nomination at the Deutsche Computerspielpreis, because I thought, oh my God, like, I'm so glad the jury recognizes that it's like a bitch and a half to write the logic for open-ended detective gameplay in like a semi-open world. But at the same time, it's not, it's like a narrative-driven game at the end of the day, right? It's not really an obvious candidate for this award. So I never expected to win. I didn't even think about what to say, because I was so sure that Thronefall would win.
I didn't really expect it to. But
really?
No. It was a pleasant surprise, I would say.
Okay. Did you think about, like, oh God, I gotta thank this and that person or something?
No.
No? Okay.
Also, Paul, we agreed if something happens, Paul just does the talking. So I was chilling. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Is there anything we should plug? I'll obviously put a bunch of links in the description, right? Also to the Kickstarter when that goes live and so on.
Oh yeah.
Anything else you want to shout out?
I want to shout out to maybe follow us so you can hear about the new things. One thing that we already have live on Steam right now is the game that we're publishing. It's called The Great Sassanelli. It's a super unique, very cool game. Also for people who are in that niche, who like narrative games and who like a good story and reading and tough choices, that type of deal. And you can follow our socials at DigiTales Interactive. We're on Instagram, is our main platform by now. We quit Twitter. We're kind of new on Blue Skies, where we have almost no following, but you can join us there. We have a Discord server. If you go to digitales.games, our website, this is where all the socials are linked. And there's also the postmortem that we've been talking about, right? This article that I wrote. Sometimes I vent on our website.
Digitales blog, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Dot Games, it's one of those obscure domain endings. Oh, I almost forgot. Unburied is the name of the Kickstarter, but it's gonna be a while till that goes live.
Got it. Nice. Yeah, cool. I'll put that all in the description. And
thank you very much.
Once again, say thank you very much for your time. It was a fun chat.